We're recording?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure she's saying yes. Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you to those of you online and everyone in person here. Thank you. We had an executive session. We are already in session, so I do not need to call us into order. We will begin our open session with public comment. I will go to online public comment first. I know Maria had put in the chat that if you wish to make public comment, to have your name and address in the chat. Is there anyone listed there at this time? I can't see.
Lindsay Banks, we just need her address.
Lindsay, can you unmute yourself, give your name and address, and then make your public comment,
I
please?
think she was just saying that she could hear us.
Unless you were just saying you could hear us.
That's correct. I don't have a public comment this evening. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Anyone in person wish to make public comment?
Have to end the year with. Hi, everyone. Nina McKinnon, 1 Road, Essex. I'm here tonight as a follow-up to the last meeting on 12/13, as there were some pending questions that would be very helpful to learn before the next school committee meeting and certainly before the community meeting on January 23rd. Specifically, public engagement. I am curious how the school committee is trying to engage the public. Would there be small group settings scheduled? The late bus has come up a lot recently. This was stopped in fiscal year 19, if I remember correctly, due to ridership levels not being adequate to run it. Is there new data that financially supports adding the bus? Because it is definitely a topic that seems to be coming up on a regular basis. Can the school committee please confirm when the E&D has been submitted to the state? The district has not submitted it, even though state law says it's supposed to be filed by the end of October. And I am curious why the school committee is okay with this information being filed almost 2 months late. It has been noted multiple times in the last 3 months, specifically from the 9/19 all boards meeting as we're referring to it, that $500,000 from reserves was put into the fiscal year 24 budget that was not really spent. I believe that this is where we keep hearing about the $92,000 that was being spent as a paid forward cost. What was the $500,000 earmarked for in this fiscal year 24 budget? Additionally, if the school committee could please provide clarity on the $287,000 amount that was rounded up to $350,000 last week, that would be helpful to understand. I do believe that it was Superintendent Bowden that mentioned, and I quote, there was no science to why this number was created. It was just a number that made sense. Why am I bringing this all up? It's information that's just needed within the community. Those of us here need to understand why this budget is the budget to support. At various times, the school committee mentioned that all ideas are on the table and lots of discussions are taking place. How does the community learn of these ideas or these discussions? And lastly, I'll just say that asking for clarity is not, in my mind, divisive. If the school committee and district truly see us as one entity, then solutions need to be found that work. I do want to thank you all for your time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful and a deserved holiday break.
Thank you, Nina. Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none, I will close public comment for the evening. Chairperson's report, I'm going to just table that. We don't have a lot to cover, but I will just take a moment, not so much in response, but to let you know our agenda tonight does indeed include a conversation about community engagement as part of our school committee goals. And a lot of those other questions are perfect questions for the back and forth of the budget forum. That is something that certainly will continue to unfold, and I know we'll cover those topics in the course of our budget conversations. Student report. Oh, sorry, chairperson's report. We have our protocols. So Erica read last time. Anna, can I? No. Well, are you capable of reading these for me? Thanks. The two that are bracketed.
Respect the leadership roles of the committee chair and the superintendent. Lead the day-to-day operations, including business transactions, to the superintendent and staff. It is school committee responsibility to evaluate the superintendent's effectiveness in this matters pursuant to the DESE's model system for educator evaluation.
Thank you. Next time, if someone else is sitting near, I just go right down the list. All right. Student report.
Great.
Diego.
So I thought I would start by talking about, met with Ms. Bowden, Ms. Whitman, and a bunch of the students on the student advisory board, which is like freshmen through seniors, last week. Was that on Wednesday?
Yep.
Was it? All right, yeah, so on Wednesday, and talked about a bunch of different things. I'd say kind of the most notable that I feel like applies probably most to the conversation today, for the agenda was talked a lot about kind of this divide between, or maybe more of like an appearance or perception of a divide among the students between people from Manchester and people from Essex. And kind of how I think it was maybe always there a little bit just because, we're from two different towns. And, we go to two different elementary schools that like each kind of have their own unique characters. So I think naturally going into the high school and being mixed together, like there's just going to be small differences. But everyone kind of expressed that over the past 2 years, they had noticed that the divide has kind of been maybe widened a little bit. And I think everyone, even like younger students who are in middle school, kind of all attributed that to some of the struggles that has been going on with budget and like obviously like, between the both towns, like there's just been a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, maybe not dialogue, but it's been like students feel like it's been contentious and they feel like that's made the divide between students from Manchester and Essex greater. And I think that's really unfortunate because like, it seems like everyone's trying to work together. So it's like the fact that there's this perception among the students that there's like, it's like almost like us versus them. Like, I don't think that's helpful at all. And I think it's like sad that the students think that. And I guess kind of what I got from it was like going forward and like continuing to just like be aware of the language people are using and this, maybe more so for like whoever's like watching too, not just the school committee, but like be careful of like what you say to your friends, like on social media and stuff, like think about the words you're using to describe each town, because at the end of the day, there's a common goal here to pass a budget that works for both towns. So to make it an us versus them thing, I don't really think is helpful, but I thought it was interesting that people thought there was a divide that had gone worse.
Diego, could you speak to that a little bit in the context of the ADL work you do and have some of the, and what Ms. Roy was talking about a little bit, like that there might be some strategies to work that we could implement from the ADL learnings to bring the student body kind of back together?
Yeah, so I think we went into a little bit about talking about bias and kind of what that means, especially in the context of our own district and when thinking about things that we struggle with and the work that the ADL does to kind of bring the school together. Obviously, this divide between Manchester and Essex was something that came up continually in the ADL meetings, something that came up in our meetings at the student advisory board. So some of, I guess, the ideas that came up were like using a lot of this like anti-bias work that we learned about in ADL, and there's this other program we talked about, but I'll talk about ADL because I participate in that, I know about that. And talking about kind of like, I guess the work to become more aware of your bias and to kind of like admit that you have one and then think of why and think of how you can improve on it, kind of bringing that into classrooms in the context of the budget situation and kind of like students' views on people from the other town and kind of working to say, okay, well, maybe these are my preconceived notions of what I think people from Manchester are like, or what I think people from Essex are like, and thinking, okay, why do I have these feelings? And then, having a conversation saying, well, okay, this is a generalization. Maybe this isn't true, like stuff like that. Oh, is that what you were looking
Yeah,
for?
yeah, just to share some of that.
Yeah.
How that went, yeah.
It went well though. I think it's helpful to kind of, like, we learned all this stuff in ADL about about various like global issues and like systemic issues in the country, but I think sometimes like bringing it back to our own community and using those strategies to kind of say, okay, these are things we can actually do for problems that we see every day, I think is really helpful and more impactful to students because it's easier to care about something that you can actually see and something to experience.
Thank you. Any important updates you might like to share with the public or the committee, just since you happen to be here as a member, as a valued member of our school committee?
Yeah, so I guess I would like to share with the school committee and everyone who's watching and has seen me over the past few years, that I got accepted into Duke early decision. Yeah, no, thank you. It's really exciting. And I guess I want to say thank you to everyone for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak every week. I've learned invaluable lessons that will help me for the rest of my life, I think, in a variety of situations. And also just want to thank the district as a whole, because obviously my education here is what's allowing me to go to Duke. So I want to thank all the amazing teachers, Superintendent Bowden, and everyone else that helped me along the way.
Just put the spotlight right on you.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for a few years here at this table, and I think it's worth our time to highlight that impressive accomplishment. So thank you for all you've done. Congratulations
Thank
from
you.
all of us.
Really
Very
appreciate it.
exciting. Anyone else have questions for Diego?
Will you keep coming to our meetings?
Might see you back here in the future. Who knows?
He's actually a student that wants your job, so let's talk offline. He's been coming to some meetings, honestly. So,
All right. Well, moving on from from student report, excuse me, to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda tonight has the minutes from the December 5th meeting and student travel for the high school senior class trip and a high school band and chorus trip. So before discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Yeah, we have to use roll.
Yeah, I will make that motion.
And is there a second? Thank you. Okay, discussion. So anyone have questions about the minutes before we move on to the travel? Minutes are good. Okay. Student travel, we have the out-of-state travel, which we approve, and I understand there's some people here.
We have some teacher and student reps here for each of the two trips.
Yes. So I don't know if we have any questions, but I would like to give you each a moment, maybe not every single one of you, but maybe like a representative from each group. If you'd like to share something about this. Who would like to speak on behalf of the senior class trip?
I'll begin. I'm Courtney Brown, the senior class advisor. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm going to really leave it up to 3 of our 4 class officers here. I know you've all seen our letter and our presentation outlining the agenda and how the trip aligns with our vision of the graduate, as well as like the financial elements of this trip. But I think even more importantly is hearing why this is important to our senior class officers. And they're really the ones who have been planning this event with me side by side, as well as the rest of their senior week. So Finn, you want to start?
yes, I'm
Couple
Finn
blurbs.
O'Hara. I'm the vice president. And so this trip is very important to us. We missed out on the Washington DC trip. And so like, I feel like our classrooms had such a great time in school together. And this is going to be really like final culminating activity. We really have all that fun. And so why we came across whitewater rafting, as opposed to the traditional or what we've done years past with Six Flags. So I think whitewater rafting would be super fun. Getting out into nature, just deconnecting from your phone. I think that's gonna be really important. So that's something that's been super important to everyone in our class. So that's where we're focusing with that. And I know it's been a tradition in the past that kind of got discontinued. And at least it was pre-COVID. And from everyone I've talked to, they all loved it. It's a great bonding experience where people are sometimes uncomfortable going into it. They're not necessarily familiar with it, but everyone encourages each other, and it's just a great experience. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Olivia.
Hi, I'm Sonder. I'm the secretary for the class of 2024. As Finn said, it's something new. I think that kind of reflects on like the Mara Vista trip that we all had as 5th graders, where all of the students get to do something new, but in a very safe environment. We have other alternatives to whitewater rafting as well, in case students aren't comfortable with that. And it just allows students to go through, try something that might be fun, something that is new to them in a very homey environment, like the lodge up in Maine gives the opportunity for.
I'm Libby Murray. I'm the senior class treasurer, and I've been attending like Manchester-Essex schools my entire life. And I can't, like, speaking on the Mara Vista trip, like that was very like foundational. in like my relationships to my classmates right now. And I can't think of like a better gift than giving that sense of community to the students in my grade, especially like how Diego mentioned, like this perception of division. And I think that that could be really like this trip could be really restorative, like in that, especially having that sense of community, like with each other and our kind of like our home before we all go off do our own things, so then we can kind of come back. And I think that like, and I think we'd be very thankful for that gift. And I think that our like behavior would be like very reflective of that.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for them while we discuss? Yes. We're in discussion, so yes, we can. Yeah.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I thought your presentation was awesome. It was really cool that you aligned it to the vision of the graduate. That was smart. I also think this sounds like a great trip. I loved hearing each of you talk about your experience with Mira Vista because it's one of the things I'm really saddened as a committee member that we haven't been able to do. But I'm glad it was a really formative experience for you. And the final comment is be very grateful for the staff who are willing to do this with you. So give them all a lot of support because it's a big ask to have educators willing to go with you.
Thank you. And add on to
Yes.
that, just in case anyone was curious, I have a long list, 15 chaperones who have volunteered. I'm gonna have to cut several. But just so the committee is aware, I have over a dozen adults chomping at the bit to accommodate or to tag along and chaperone with these guys. So
Thank you. And then for our other trip, I see Mr. Janak, would either of you like to speak to this at all? Or would you just like to answer?
Yeah, I'm Joe Janak, I'm the band director at the middle school, high school, and Ben, I'm the course director of middle school, high school. Yeah, so I guess Brad said, we sent a letter, we got the detailed itinerary, sort of how it's next to the vision of the graduate, what the students would be doing, the experiences that they would be able to have, performances that they would be able to see, performances that they would partake in. But so beyond that, just a couple of other points that we want to bring up is much like the senior class trip, there's a history of the music department going on trips. We'd like to bring that back into the fold. So my second year here, I took the high school band to Philadelphia for 3 days, and that was an amazing trip. Since then, we've done more smaller departmental trips with the band and chorus, taking trips to see the Boston Symphony Orchestra, seeing performances that way. And we view this as a way to help sort of bring the department together even more by going on expanded trip to a place like New York City to sort of raise the visibility of our program, increase collaboration between the groups and the students partaking, as well as just raising the visibility of the group and helping with retention and improvement.
Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of it. I guess the only thing I'll add is that when I was in high school, I went on these kinds of trips all 4 years of high school, and to this day, like some of my most formative memories of high school, socially, musically, just getting out into the world. I think context is really important. To be able to just see things within the Manchester-Essex community, but see things like the Broadway shows that just you can't see anywhere else. Shows the caliber.
And providing the opportunity for students that might not be able to partake otherwise, like Mr. Edna, that senior Broadway show. If approved, we would see the New York Philharmonic perform the soundtrack to a movie while the movie plays on the screen. That's seeing the highest caliber.
And then also getting to perform outside of Manchester.
Anyone have questions for Ben and Joe?
In general, how are the music trips funded? Are they funded in different ways or are they?
Yeah.
Okay. They'd be student funded, but what we already have ideas through our Music Honor Society for fundraising and that help to raise cause.
The class trip is covered fully by class dues, so it is student funded. Along the way, though, class dues are $50 per year. So under the assumption that a student has paid that full $200, they're automatically invited to attend. Of course, we never want a financial burden to limit an opportunity, so that would be handled on an individual basis. But our class fundraisers, the class auction that happened over the fall, all of those sorts of events help us offset this cost of senior.
So to be clear, none of these are on us.
Nothing, nope, we've got money in the bank ready to spend.
Yeah. I'm sure there's room in the budget.
Got nothing but. Right. Any further questions? So actually, I would ask the committee, oh, go ahead.
I have questions about just the process in general. So why do we, this is probably controversial, but why do we ban the DC trip, but allow some trips? So what's the process? What's the rationale behind it?
So I will speak to, at this level, we approve these trips because they're out of state. So these, the trips are handled at the building level with anything going above the building level to you, but it comes to us specifically because it's out of state travel. We have other policies that,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I guess give a very brief answer and we
Yeah.
can go into it at a later meeting if you'd like. So these two trips are exciting and fun, but they are extracurricular and completely voluntary. So they're not part of the curriculum or part of the program. Famous word. The program is really our K-12 curriculum and instruction plan and the coursework that we offer. Washington DC was seen as a part of the program class trip where we needed to accommodate every student's right to attend, and it became expensive and we began to struggle with being able to afford the staffing necessary to go and entice staffing to travel for that length of time. Similar situation with Marivista. So we can certainly revisit those. We have a different obligation for a mandatory curriculum-based class trip.
So this is like the trip to, say friends or Spain
Yes.
recently?
Yes.
Students are choosing to go. Sometimes there's personal expense, sometimes they'll cover it through fundraising. Really, the initiation of the approval for out-of-state travel, then we revisited this because we haven't done a lot of trips during the COVID years, gives them the permission to now organize, fundraise, and line up all of the pieces.
So my question for the committee, are we comfortable voting on these together as part of the consent agenda?
Yes.
I'm not hearing any concern about that. Okay, then all in favor? And that's unanimous. Aries, you are free to organize and move forward. Congratulations, have fun.
Thank you. Very nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to make you wait.
Yeah.
Make us proud.
Thank you. Make good choices for who you are. Seniors. All right.
Have a good night.
You too. All right, subcommittee reports. Our facilities subcommittee has not met. It'll be changing soon.
Oh, boy.
Collaboration, we have collaboration relisted here. So our finance subcommittee has not met, but there is, did you end up sending out word for me to report on yet?
I just haven't
Okay.
gotten to it.
So I will just bring up here that there's, we had some conversation following the public hearing about setting up a collaboration meeting with the understanding that our committee is supportive of participation, provided that it is a public or an open meeting, excuse me, an open meeting. So we do have some things that need to be discussed between some key players with MSBA and things moving forward. So we are going to do that. Of course, everyone will be kept aware of the schedule on that. So that you choose to attend, you may.
Was there any feedback from the rest of the collaboration group about that?
So no, initially I received one reply. When I sent out the letter after our vote, I had reported at a different meeting, I received one reply from someone who said that it wasn't ideal, but that they would participate. But that's all I've received as official communication, but we also haven't sent out an ask. So I think we'll find out if there's problems moving forward with that when there's an actual ask.
Am I correct in thinking that there were no collaboration group meetings scheduled?
No, there were not. Right.
But you're saying that you're gonna, or Pam, you're gonna send out ask.
Yep.
To see if people would like to have it and if it's possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're targeting a couple of weeks we get back after the break to see if we can't find a date.
Yeah.
And if there's enough people.
We do have some things to go.
I agree,
Sure.
yeah.
Negotiations.
Negotiations are ongoing. Our next meeting is in January.
Thank you very much. Succinct. Policy and program, subcommittee. Have you met?
We have not.
You have not met. Okay. Then, for this, what I'd like to do is just refer our committee to the letter that I sent, that went out with the packet, that I referenced at our December 5th meeting. This is from a parent, of a parent who lives in town, but, whose student goes to a private school. That private school, this is a middle school student. That private school does not offer the sport that this student, would like to play. And we have provisions for homeschool students to play sports with our district because our district is responsible for homeschool students. They're still under district purview, but private school students are not. And so this parent has kind of gone through the process of conversation with the middle school and with Pam, and then basically is bringing it to us to request consideration of a policy regarding this, allowing that to be the case. So the letter that was sent is basically her story. You've had it, you've been able to read it. So tonight, all I'm asking is that we come to decision as to whether this is something we want to hand over to the policy and program subcommittee, if we agree that this is something that should be studied further to make a recommendation either way. As far as timing goes, I've been in contact with this parent in order to let them know the process for how this goes, to let them know through the policy, through our policy manual, how this works. And so they understand that. The hope is that, they would be able to understand an outcome in time for next fall when this sport is pertinent to them. But they're also interested in pursuing this, not only for their own student, but for others as well. It's an unanswered question currently. So that is the play here. So I guess the way I want to do this, the way we want to do this is, I'm going to make a motion that we give this that we make this assignment to the policy and program subcommittee for further exploration. If there's a second, then we'll go to discussion. So
Second.
discussion?
Can I make a point of clarification about the letter that we received?
Yeah.
It says that we allow some sports, but not other sports at the middle school level. And I think that it's important to clarify that the examples given, cheerleading and football, are actually town sports. Those are not school sports. So the Junior Hornets program is a recreational program run through the towns, and the Junior Hornets cheerleading is a recreational program run through the towns. Those are not school sports, and so I just want to make sure that we're not setting precedents based on that.
And my expectation is that when this is explored in subcommittee,
Yep.
all of that will be very clarified, fully clarified. So, any other questions or discussion about this?
That helped. I didn't know there was a difference between school sports and town sports, and I know some.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's confusing about those is that they're called the Hornets.
You're right.
Go ahead,
We'll
Pam.
take it up. It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
There's MIA guidance.
There's
Some of our
loads.
sports are.
But tonight we only have to decide whether or not this is something we're going to explore.
The
further.
policy committee is so excited for a rabbit hole. That sounds awesome.
Well, so my other comment is, can we put a date on said rabbit hole?
And that, so,
Because I know how rabbit holes end, which is,
so that was part of my reason for bringing it here, is that I know that our policy and program subcommittee is meeting frequently, or maybe not all the time, but meeting enough, and is exploring quite a lot right now. And I have been very clear with the parent that that's the case as well. So this may take some time. Perhaps if we do send this to subcommittee, part of the work, the first thing will be to look at what a reasonable timeframe would be for this, prioritizing the work that you have. I do have concerns. I think at a different meeting, we're going to have a clearer report out on where things stand with that committee and in how that time's being spent and what are some of the outcomes that we're bringing back from it and in what timeframe we'll get them. So that when things like this come up, which is our job, we can actually task it out and have a reasonable timeframe coming back. Did you have something?
Yeah, is there a specific deadline, or timeline that was supposed to be aware of, like the, whatever sports it is, that, the sign-up date? So it would be good to have the policy before that.
Well, this is for next, this student would be impacted for next fall.
But the sign up will be in June for
Okay.
fall sports.
Yeah.
But I
Middle
would say
school
in
sports, you
general,
can
middle school.
register in the fall.
in general, we are not. I don't think that it is worth the time and energy of the policy committee to set a goal to change this policy in the middle of the school year. So I think that by the end of the school year, so that it can be enacted for next school year, would be a reasonable timeline.
And that's for us to set.
When you say change the policy, is there a policy?
No, so,
Okay, so-
right, there are some policies that might be pertinent to this, but for now, we're just calling it development.
Right.
So just want to keep it not rabbit hole-ish. Is this something we wish to task, entertain?
Well,
So
how does
any
the
other?
policy committee feel?
I mean, I was moved by the story and I like the idea that the author said of looking for opportunities to say yes when we can to community engagement. I don't know, I have a lot of questions for Pam and I won't take us there now, but I do like the idea of looking to say yes, so I would be willing to consider this. Yeah.
That was my conversation with her as well.
Yes.
It's an interesting idea. There are a lot of things we need to explore, that questions we'll need to answer to implement it.
Yeah, unanticipated outcomes are always my question, but that's not what we have to determine tonight. Right, so, okay, so, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. I will let her know. She thanks you. She couldn't be here tonight. She thanks us for our time. And I will let her know. Next up, we have superintendent's report with our MSBA update.
Yeah, I'm gonna send this around, just as an additional reference sheet to what I put in your packet. for you. But while this is going around, I'll just quickly try to answer a couple of financial questions that came up. So this year's E&D submission is prepared and ready to be submitted. When it was prepared, we moved up the auditors so that they came in to review, and there's just a reconciliation discrepancy that needs to be resolved before we make the full submission. So it's ready to go as soon as we can settle up with Powers and Sullivan. It appears there was an entry of a voucher piece. So they just need, because we need to assess the liabilities, they just want to make sure it's as accurate as possible.
Can I ask one question about that? Is there any consequence or any issue related to being beyond the deadline?
We got the first notification because it's 30 days past the October 31st deadline. If it is egregious enough, they can withhold funds. I don't know that that's ever been done.
But we're not being actively fined or anything
No,
like that.
there's no fine.
It's important to do, but it's important to know that we're not
Yeah, it's just
taking
that
on. Yeah.
they just need to resolve the difference in their assessments so that we have a final number to submit. So I would assume that's going in within the next week or two. We should have it for January, February, I think, with that timeline. The question that came up on the use of E&D back to 2023. My recollection on that is just very briefly, we had intended a tentative budget to go with our 335 that had been the placeholder from previous years. It had been part of a multi-year discussion about creating a bridge to a correction. In FY '23, there were 4 or 5 scenarios to do a combination of cuts and use of reserves. And I think we were trying to fill a gap that ranged somewhere in the 900s to up to 1.2 million. And through all of those discussions and all the scenarios of what could be cut and what could be charged to reserves, there was a balance that was met. And part of that balance was to limit the number of cuts by increasing the reserves from 335 to 520. That was also the point in which we had been having active conversations that the following, that would be the end of the bridge, and the following year we would be receiving we would go forward together to lobby for a correction. Obviously, we weren't successful, and we used 335 again or we started with a 335 placeholder last year. Similar process through the negotiation of where you want the budget to land. It came down to 287. We reinstated the 350 just as a round number. Our goal to bring down the assessment by using that. So there is no particular science. It was just a number that we started with that was relatively close to where we've been in years past. And that's my recollection of how the 520 and the 350 emerged. A lot of it is just kind of going through and trying to find that just right balance between the things that we've eliminated and a number that people are hoping that we can meet. So I don't know if that helps.
We'll have lots of time to go through all of this.
So those two things I actually was looking at this week, so it was fresh in my mind. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this because we're gonna spend a lot of time on this for the next 3 to 6 years. Yeah. Hopefully. But what you have in front of you is just a broad overview of what the different modules. So by being approved for MSBA, that means we are now in the position of doing our preliminary work. MSBA is basically a large grant program, so we have to adhere to certain guidelines, parameters, and timelines to ensure that we get our refund. We're in the refund category, or the reimbursement, sorry, is the appropriate word for it. We're in the reimbursement category of approximately 30% of the overall project. Not all items being reimbursable. It's a good working number though. So where we are right now is module 1. That's the one that started. They call it the eligibility period, and in the eligibility period, we have to essentially go through and do a couple of different studies. It's basically to show that we are ready to participate in their full program. We will go through, we'll submit some documentation around certification, some practices that we have. We will submit an overview of our current program of studies for the elementary school. That's done through this process because they want to build to the type of education we want to provide. So we did that at Memorial School. We have an active program of studies used for both buildings. We'll use that at this stage. There'll be a part of the process later on in module 3 and 4 where we reinvestigate that and rethink and go through an exercise of envisioning to see if there are any changes we want to make with regard to how facilities design could impact instruction. But pin in that, that's later to come. Also in the eligibility period, we're going to engage in an enrollment study. So we'll have to fill out some documents, but MSBA will also provide us with a certified enrollment projection for the next, I think it's 10 years, that they study and provide to us, which will then help to generate the size, the facility size that we need to aim for in later stages of the project. So we'll be looking at our program, we'll be looking at enrollment, and what we'll need to do, really the major piece in this is we need to show our readiness to move to the next phase. We have to be voted in to the next phase by successfully completing all of these tasks. A key task is providing a funding mechanism to engage in a feasibility study. When we engage in this process for the Memorial School, we received word that we were in eligibility in January, and we did vote that spring at the town meetings to fund the feasibility study. It's somewhat similar to the turf field project in that we did a 3-way split. The school put up part of its reserves for the project, Essex and Manchester as well. I think they were free cash votes at each of the town meetings. We will be given some comparables when we do our official onboarding meeting. Those comparables will help us determine a figure to use to raise the resources. Once all of those pieces are in place, we submit them to the MSBA, and then we're invited to come for another meeting like we did, and they will vote on whether or not we can move to the next phase. The next phase would be feasibility. That's the fun one. That's where you hire your project manager, your design team, and then you start to build the scope of the project. You go through a process of schematic design, engagement with the community on what they want. That's where we may be studying, some of the questions that have come up here. Do we want to renovate or rebuild? What's the most cost-effective way to do it? Should we consider a consolidation of schools at this point, given our current enrollment? If we do, what's the financial impact of that? All of those questions are in, there's a prescribed way we go about engaging the community. We don't act as the lead. The project manager and the architect will act as the lead in engaging the community to solicit the inputs that they need to draft a schematic design. So when you exit feasibility, it takes about 18 months. So we would look at wrapping up all of the prep work, like what do we want to build? What are our design options? What's our settled design? That will take us through the spring of 26. And then we would be going to MSBA to say, look, we have all our ducks in a row. We've gone through all of the process. We have a community. We've had community engagement. We believe we have the support to go forward. They will approve the plan, and then we would go out for a vote. So if we are able to meet all of our benchmarks in the process, the vote could be in the fall of 26 for the full project design. That's it in an overview. So it's not going to happen overnight. We don't even officially start eligibility until March. So we have plenty of time to get organized and to think this through.
All right, so I have a question, and I'm guessing other people do too. So my question is for the timing for that vote for the funding for feasibility, where it could potentially be spring, could potentially be fall. Is that something that should be considered and worked through like as the collaboration group, or is that something we wait until we see the school building committee to, or that's the words, right? SBC.
So
right? Yeah. To let them handle it.
When we worked with the Memorial School, it was the initial discussions happened with the collaboration group.
Okay.
Because we'll start to seat the school building committee around March.
Okay. So that'll be a topic. Got
And
it.
it was fairly straightforward at the time because everybody was using a bit of their reserves to pay for it. And that's one of the things that I think should be on the agenda.
Yep, for right now. Absolutely right now.
I'm saying it's spring. Obviously, there are a lot of people who need to weigh in. I know MSBA encourages you to do it early in the process and not wait till the last minute in case something goes wrong and you need to go back and do it again. So if we did it initially in the spring and the town partners are on board with that, that would give us a backup date of the fall in case something were to go off.
Yeah, those fall town meetings are buttoned up to like 2 weeks away from that deadline. Okay.
And we can submit early, like if we are successful, we can get, because we know the process, I think it can move rather quickly in this stage. As soon as we submit our pieces, we'll get put on the agenda to move to the next phase.
I think I saw Anna. Go ahead.
So I wasn't here when the memorial process was getting planned, so forgive me if this is like some obvious answer to this. So the project manager, is that gonna be like a third party? So my question then would be, it's interesting that you mentioned that there is a phase that we're gonna look at a different scenario, whether it would be in high school, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Is that, who makes that decision? Is it the project managers, or is it us? Like, and my second question kind of related to that is are the town finances part of the evaluation? The town finance for the long, especially now we are in the budget crisis, I would think that this add-on cost will be added to that. So what does that evaluation look like? Who does that?
Let me take it from the top.
Yeah.
So this group, we will seat a school building committee, and part of the school building committee will be representatives from this group, but it will become an independent group that shepherds the process through and reports back to school. That group will then identify a project manager. From the project manager identification, we will move to the architecture identification, a little rusty. That group collectively will take us through the process of feasibility. So they'll set the scope, but there's always a feedback loop back to school committee. But they'll go through the process of identifying. So I would say that the architects really take the lead on talking about what your building options are. And the project manager works on our behalf to make sure the architect is doing what we're asking them to do. So no one person makes the final decision. It's not like the district is saying we want a new Essex elementary school. Right now, we're saying something needs to be done, and we're giving ourselves over to this process to determine from public input and from MSBA design process to help us determine what it will be. What I can say about the MSBA design process in response to your question about the finances, it's an education-driven project. So they're gonna want us to look at our program and what we want from our program, how we do business in our program, what we design Memorial School to do. And they will work to ensure that what we build meets those needs. But part of the drive in it all is to find the most cost-effective way to do it. So finances don't drive it. We won't do an analysis of town's ability or interest in paying. We'll come up with a design, and then it's gonna be on that committee and on the project manager and the architects to figure out how to engineer that design to fit what our financial ability to pay is. That makes any sense. And eventually it has to pass town, has to pass a town vote for appropriation. So we have to be mindful of what. And there's an incredible amount, I know you like to dig around in data, there's an incredible amount of data on the MSBA site that's going to show you comparable sized schools and what they're costing.
Also, I want to entertain questions on this. I also might suggest that because I know Jake was at least part of the SBC for Memorial, but the rest of us weren't that involved in this. So we might want to do a workshop at some point to really go through this so that we understand as this moves forward. Or we just don't have a lot longer in a meeting. You know what I mean?
I don't know if it's early. I think it's going to be part of delegating authority to another group.
That could be. Yeah, I just mean in terms of how much understanding do we need at the table so that we can then delegate the authority and move on, because MSB is going to tell us what we.
MSBA tells you who you need to have on.
Yeah, oh yeah, no.
I'm not going into the weeds here. I just wondered when you said that they're really going to tell us, will they ultimately provide options, alternatives? You know, here's one option, here's a cost, here's another option, here's a cost.
That's what SBC and the project team will do for us.
Automatically, we don't have to direct them to do that. That is
No.
part of their role.
No, they're gonna come up with, they'll come up with multiple themes, they'll come up with different price tags, they'll tell us if you add this, it's gonna cost that. You will have options to choose from.
Right, but so the way you just said it made me feel like, exactly what you just said in your introduction, that there's a variety of different things that are gonna have different price tags, depending on whether we renovate, rebuild, combine, all those things. Will they explore the way, just now you said, I'm not talking about like just if you add a playground, it will be this additional amount of dollars. I'm saying, will they give us separate options for doing a combined school, doing a renovated school and doing, okay.
Yep, if that's what we put in the scope of work feasibility.
And that's school committee's responsibility for
School building committee.
School building.
So the school building committee,
Got it.
if you get, the document that I sent you has links on it. You're gonna see that the school building committee requires us to have community members with certain backgrounds that have expertise in these areas. So we have an informed committee helping receive information from our hired folks, processing it and making decisions. I can't speak for the committee, but if they're listening, we have had members who served on the middle high school building committee, then serve on the memorial building committee, and I think it would be a wonderful opportunity for them to continue forward so they can kind of pull the thread through what the experience has been.
How big was that company? How many people?
There's a few architects.
There's a
local
lot of people on
architects.
that email.
There are 10 or 12, plus the project manager, plus the architect. Yeah, it's a good size group.
Right, so we're good. We're good, yeah. Have our information. All right,
And
thank you.
this is a good reference chart of the blue pieces are the things that we do and the green. It really is an exercise in allowing, like, we're gonna hire professionals and they're gonna guide us through the process. So we will, what's in blue is what we need to do and what's in green, the professionals will do for us.
Love it. MSBA is very generous and we are grateful to be part of this process.
And we haven't had our official onboarding meeting yet. Like, there's another document out there that I really like because it highlights who votes at what juncture. So I'm gonna try to get my hands on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
So no, super exciting.
Yeah,
We are
very
all
exciting news. All right. Thank you for your updates.
Yeah.
Continued business, director's update. Leonard, would you like to come join us? I'm really grateful for this because we've had so many questions coming in and, you know, what have you heard and when and how? And now we can just say, right now, getting an update on some things. So, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me a little bit of time to share a few updates. I'm hoping Pam and I were talking about just trying to have it be a regular thing. So it's short and sweet, just to keep you in the loop about things going on in the curriculum instruction and instructional technology office. I have 4 quick topics I just wanted to share with you, some updates. A lot of this has been shared out in different venues, but I thought it was worth highlighting. One is that we are excited that we received the Arts and Cultural Vitality Innovation Grant from DESE, which is providing over $5,000 to let us do work to dig in and explore and evaluate our arts and cultural course offerings. And it's really designed to examine it through 4 levels. It starts with infrastructure, like literally what do we have? What opportunity do students have to engage? What is the level of participation? And then what is the level of impact? So it takes you through a field designed rubric that they've spent the last 2 years applying with some different pilot districts around our state to measure those different levels of offerings and opportunities in districts. And the big piece of this grant is actually you get to join a network with DESE. So we had our first meeting and we actually get a chance to be with other districts that are also going through this process. So you get to share and collaborate both the examination process and then what other folks are doing. And then there is a lot of support in thinking about it. So what, right? So the team goes through, does the evaluation, and then starts to make some recommendations and action planning from there. So it's a really nice structured tool to have us go through like essentially a curriculum review process of our arts offering to really examine what different opportunities do we have for growth and where do we want to celebrate, expand, and so on. And our team has representation of 5 staff members across levels and buildings, 5 community representatives, and 2 administrators. So it's a nice diverse group that'll be able to examine that. Another big chunk of work that we're focused on this year is the history and social science curriculum review process, which is looking at kindergarten through 12th grade. What do we teach? When do we teach? What resources do we use to teach our history and social sciences? And that opportunity is really focusing on the relatively new history social science standard that came through the Department of Education and really looking at our alignment to those frameworks to make sure that we have thoughtful course pathways and offerings that our students are being provided the opportunity to meet those different standards across those grade levels, and that our teachers have the right tools, resources, and training to teach those different content areas. And simultaneously being supported by that was a grant that I know we've shared with you before, that's allowing us to field test a curriculum called Investigating History, which was developed in concert with the Department of Education and some other field-based expert groups, including universities and organizations like Primary Source, who are really experts in the field. We received over $22,000, which is actually funding really rich and rigorous professional development for 8 of our educators that are field testing this tool. It's also providing access to print resources, digital resources, and we're actually part of a network. So it is ourselves, Reading, Wakefield, and Watertown who have created a virtual network to allow teachers not to feel like they're trying this in isolation. So we have an opportunity for some of our teachers to actually meet virtually with some of their colleagues in other places trying it. What's working? What are you focused on? So that again, we're really moving outside of our own singular space and really sharing ideas, strategies, and research as well. And Hamilton Wenham is actually, I just had a teacher reach out to me and say, I heard from one of your teachers you're doing this, can I jump in? So we have some neighbors starting to build a nice professional network around that work. The third topic I wanted to share in the instructional technology space is we have just become members of the SDPC, which is I had to write this one down to make sure I got the acronym right. It's the Student Data Privacy Consortium. It's a collaboration of schools, districts, nonprofits, and other organizations to really look and examine at our practices around student data privacy and the different virtual tools that we're using to make sure we're being good stewards of our students' information. And it also provides us some field partners to really look towards, both policy and practices around student data privacy. It's a really important part of the work happening in technology as advances go. And so it's really letting us, again, build that network and that connection. And it's also providing us a clearinghouse of different tools and resources that we utilize to make sure that they're meeting our expectations to protect our students' information. So that's a lot of work that the technology departments are leading into this year. So more to come there. And then the final piece I just wanted to share, and this is a preview with more to come, hopefully in the new year, is following the work that we shared with you around the assessments, the assessment overview in the fall. We've been looking to see what work can we do internally, so examining the different data review protocols we're utilizing, how we're identifying what the support might look like, how are we making sure we're supporting all, targeted support for some, and then that really intensive intervention for the few that might need it. And simultaneously looking at what haven't we tried or what are other opportunities that were out there. So we did apply and receive a grant for high dose tutoring from Department of Education, which was offered in the area of mathematics. DESE offered it for grades 4 and grades 8. So we will have students participating from grades 8 and from Essex Elementary at grade 4. And based on the number that they accepted us for, we'll essentially be receiving over $30,000 of high dose tutoring provided by Massachusetts certified teachers through a field partner to really target those critical areas and skills in mathematics. Simultaneously, while we're doing this, we're exploring to see what would that look like if there were other spaces to be creative about targeting those supports, while we're also leading into that continued examination around tier 1. We heard a bit about that with some of the budget work that they're hoping for next year to continue that. That's it.
Just that.
Just yeah. So
Right. Do you mind entertaining questions? All right, so we'll do one round of a question each. Go ahead. Go ahead again.
So the high dose tutoring.
Yes.
Like the 30,000, does that offset the need for the thing that parents?
Great question. Not at all. If we actually don't get funds. DESE's actually done some of the work they've done recently, both with curriculum work and with some service provision around PD, is that they don't send you funds that you can use the way you want. They create the partnership and they do direct to provider fiscal support. This high dose tutoring, it's really based on more research, field research that's showing that short periods of time for intensive blocks of time to target can help to close identified gaps. So what this isn't is that ongoing intervention support through our multi-tiered systems of support that we have within our classrooms, that every day they're providing that in the moment support. This is really like identifying a really explicit need, and you provide a really intensive block of time. So it's actually 90 minutes a week for 12 weeks. So it's intensive, but that goal is that it really remediates that learning gap that we might be seeing with a really targeted approach. It's an additional way that we're trying to support, and the beautiful opportunity we have here is both when our ongoing benchmark assessments fall, we're going to have one right before they engage in the tutoring and then after, so we can look at, did we see a shift in that growth as compared to ours, which will help give us information about tutoring models and intervention opportunities, and they provide ongoing data collection as well. So it's a nice way for us to really look to see, does it have the impact we would expect it to see? What would it look like if we wanted to be creative and think about things for us in the future as well? So.
And the $25,000 for the arts, the grant?
The art grant was around a little over $5,000.
Oh, just 5,000, okay, never mind.
And that it's really, the beautiful thing about DESE is they're really supporting a lot of the current shifts in the field. The challenging thing is they're incredibly restrictive on what you can use the funds for.
So it's not like we can hire like an art director?
No, it is,
but it can tell us if we need more.
It is to complete, the process. So it's really primarily allowed for stipended work for our contracted employees. So teachers, certified teachers that are engaging in the process, the funds can go to that, or materials we might use during the vitality review. But it's primarily just to fund the time to go through this process of using this field-based rubric to evaluate our programming, which then will help us. So it's a self-evaluation, but it's incredibly structured with support, external support from DESE. In a lot of ways, they'll even come and do interviews and field visits with us. then that information then helps us think, so what, right? So we get this information, then what are the next steps and how do we make that recommendation? And then it, you know, as with any program review, you think about what are the priorities, what's realistic, what is, you know, what does that need next steps? So, thank you. You're welcome.
Like a Habib report for the arts.
It's like a big report.
That's a nice way to put it.
It's probably good to note that DESE does not, it's very rare that they would provide grant funding for the purchase of a thing, like a tool, or the hiring of a person. Only through, like, when ARPA came through and then ESSER, when there was like a critical emergency, they give you some more leeway, usually because there's federal funds coming through to do some hiring, but if you're getting money, it's usually to promote or support something that they're asking you to do, investigate. So it's seed money to grow your program or evolving program.
And I can tell you even specifically, having gone through it in my previous district, even when I was able to receive a grant to support an adoption of a high quality curriculum material, we did not receive the money and then buy it. It was direct to the vendor. So they're doing a lot more of that. They're doing a lot of that sort of approved professional development providers, approved processes, approved pieces that you're then working with them. If you decide to take that path, they are fiscally supporting it, but indirectly.
Erica, have a question? First of all, thank you for your efforts to secure these grants. These are really important, especially, well, to my thinking, the performing arts and the math grants are really two areas of need that we've identified. So I'm looking forward to what you learn. With respect to the math grant, I was wondering if you could speak about one, whether or not the district has worked with the partner before, and two, how many students, particularly in the fourth grade in Essex, will benefit from the service?
Great question. Manchester-Essex has not worked with the partners. So DESE had a group of pre-vetted partners that they had identified based on the type of tutoring what and how it happened. And then when you applied it, then partner you. So we've been identified to partner with Imagine Learning. I personally worked with them in my previous roles, and actually it was ironic when I got on the call. It was like, Heather. So, you know, it's nice to see some familiar faces. But Manchester-Essex has not worked with them previously. This expansion of this tutoring is really coming through this DESE support around the high dose tutoring. It's a program they want folks to try to see if we're seeing that level of impact. So they themselves are expanding. They've worked, Imagine Learning has worked with Edgenuity, if you're familiar with that group who's done some of this on-demand tutoring in the past. So it's an established structure on a private verified server. It's a live teacher with a small group of students who have Massachusetts certification. So it's you know, vetted through this really rigorous process with DESE. And we get every single day, we get data updates, and they'll do simultaneous progression updates through it.
So it's Zoom? Is that what you're saying when you said?
It's virtual. Yep, so it is virtual. The 8th grade will be doing it during the day, during the me block time. And then in the elementary school, we'll be doing it directly after school. And the elementary school is just in the process of going through the identification of the targeted students would be, and they're really using what are we seeing from our internal benchmark assessments, MCAS data, other classroom-based measures, and gonna then set priorities based on that need and those priority standards for those small groups.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
My question is, so just to follow up, so we don't know exactly how many of these.
No, this is, like I said, this was kind of a preview. It's very early to share, but it's pretty exciting opportunity for us to try something really different and be responsive to what we're seeing, see what that might mean for us for the future, but I'll keep you in the loop.
Yeah, and then, and just following up on Anna's, I want to make sure I'm hearing this right, that the tutoring part of it, that is direct instruction to students, whereas for those listening and trying to pay attention to what's happening here, the instructional coaches that we're talking about, that's to tier one instruction that's supporting the teachers. So I just want to make sure we're clarifying.
Yes, that tutoring, it's really based around a lot of recent research that's come out in the field around the idea of high intensity with a short period of time, high dose tutoring is really what they're calling it, directs to students rather than long little bits at a time. So it's really based around more recent field research that's come out that's really looked at, you know, what does it look like if you're seeing gaps in, you know, performance gaps and what are different methods to close them. It is in small groups. So the research shows the numbers between 3 and 5 students in a group. not one-on-one and not larger than that. DESE is requiring groups of 4. So it's really based around the field research. So length of time, 12 weeks, minutes per week is 90, group size is 4. And we have a pretty, we were excited to see how many they accepted us for. So then we're really going through the data to make sure we're matching those students that might really benefit from this targeted support through that data analysis.
It's really exciting. I'm getting a lot of comments and questions from community members about and we're hearing it in public comment about, the ESF. So this sounds like a well-rounded approach and I appreciate it. My actual question is, I know for our internal curriculum review for history, that we usually get a report out on that at the end of the year when that takes place. For the arts review, do you have a time frame that you guys are working with?
I would expect us to be wrapped with the formalized process with DESE through June.
Okay.
By wrapped, I would mean we've completed the index fully to their extent. I think not having been here before, I can't speak to how curriculum review processes have worked before. I think the level of intensity depends on the scale of the program and the review that's taking place. So I expect that the history social science curriculum review will take place over the course of the year. I think this arts review piece will likely be able to be done within the 6 months of that shortened period of time, mostly because it's incredibly structured, that it's very programmatic, the process you go through. So that's their timeline, so I'm going to follow it. I haven't been through this. This is a new process for me, but I would hope that by June you will have an update either way. But I hope by June we have some conclusions we can share.
That's great. Wonderful. Other questions? Side of the table?
Yeah, my questions were answered.
Questions were answered.
Welcome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for the
very
time.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. What a great addition to our meetings.
Yeah, I like it.
Love it.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you. All right, moving on, fiscal year 25 tentative budget hearing debrief. So looking at the time, it's about 5 minutes of 8. I want to make sure that we leave time for our second part of this. So if we say, if it's needed, we may not need that long, but let's make sure we try to wrap this part of the conversation up by 8:30 so that we leave a half hour to talk about the engagement if we need it. Ending early is not bad, but I just want to make sure we have a little bit of a clock that we're working on. So for the tentative budget hearing debrief, what I'd like to structure this so that it doesn't just turn into a rabbit hole in and of itself is go around the table, give everyone a chance to offer any thoughts or takeaways that we had. If you have them, that you'd like to share, things that you think are important to move forward, things we need Pam to hear based on, what we heard in that meeting. And go from there. It may take a while, it may not, but so for now, we're just sharing our insights, not questioning each other because we have a whole budget process to go through. So I'm going to go backward this time. Can I start in the East Wing?
Yes. I would say my takeaway is that I did not hear anyone asking for cuts in program or staffing. Even people who voiced concerns about cutting the budget seems to want more support and more essentially robust programming. And so I feel as though we were headed in the right direction when we said that we wanted to see the budget that delivers the program that meets the needs of our students in the fiscal year.
Yeah, I would just say that Pam did a great job with her presentation. And made it very clear what is driving, some of these increases, talked about health insurance, staffing. And, I think it's pretty clear, we also talked about like the wants of the principals, if there was some cushion there. And I don't think these asks are really, extravagant or out of line. I think, let's see where this settles in at, and if we can help support principals for some of these requests and let's see if we can make that happen. But I think overall, I agree with Kate. I didn't hear anybody stand up and ask for, cuts. And we're certainly not in the business of using the diminished education, so, but there were no surprises, right? So, that's all I have.
Chris?
I don't really have, everything that was discussed and what I heard, I think, I was probably aware of 98% of that, so. I think that hearing it again just reinforces, the information that we're hearing from the public and what our direction is, so. I think that was positive.
Anna?
I was second what John said. I think the presentation this year was a lot more clear than last year. Right to the point, exactly what we need and what we don't need. So I think you guys did a great job in the first draft. I think that's going to help the next few months to get us to the final draft. I think at the end of the day, yes, I think we all want the same things. Nobody wants cuts or change or, reduce our education level. I think that was clear. I do start to see the divide already in the communities. And we are only in December. And so what I was thinking about is, some people mentioned before is we don't know what to do because I think there is a budget process that we have to go through right now. There is a budget crisis that we need to solve in the long term. And I don't feel like we are even there yet to even touch the surface to figure out the long term. And, last night I was looking at the calendar for our school committee. There's a big gap between after the budget is done versus September. And I would recommend us to really get to work. I mean, I don't want to devote any more time than we already have, but we really have to, because I feel like we're going to come back at this again next year. Unless we figure out a solution that we can work with both towns, because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, we are in the district. As a parent, I would like to, give you the entire 300,000 that all the principals propose as a parent, but we are in the district together. And if we are duking it out between the two towns, the people that are suffering are the kids. And we just need to stabilize the situation, the financial situation, and the culture, like Diego said. Students and teachers, we cannot put them through this again. And what we can do now in the next 5 years, 10 years, is something we have to figure out. And we really have to get forward.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm making notes at the same time. Jake couldn't be here, but he had some feelings and reflections that I will share. And he actually wrote it up in kind of long form and then short form. And it was actually really helpful for me to read it, but all of it came back to kind of questions. I guess he's leaving with more reflective questions than answered information. And so, one thing he's thinking about now is there any way to effectively achieve level services at or about 2.5% overall growth this year in order to get support for a plan for growth next year and into the future? And if not, how do we and the towns think about investments in growth this year in the context of potential future override requests, such as for EES? So in his reflecting, he's thinking about this in terms of the context of how this is going to impact the future and those questions that we ask, which I think is helpful. My takeaways are as follows. So I hear what everyone's saying. I might have heard things a little bit different. Nobody explicitly says, I want cuts. I don't think anybody has said, I would like you to cut something in any of this just for fun. But the Essex ask is still officially 2.5%. And that would indeed require, now you stop shaking your head, my friend. I know it's all tentative and we're like, there may be good news and it may be closer than we think, and that's great. And I think that's important. But it is important that, I mean, the question of the night was, this is level services. This is the direction if we add more things in by requests, and this is the direction if we meet that specific ask. And so that is something that I took away from that the official Essex representation ask is still 2.5% overall assessment growth. And that's something that we are going to have to grapple with as a decision kind of thing. A second takeaway is that I am still hearing a few different people talk about this audit. I think that if we don't at some point make an actual decision as to say whether we are going to choose to engage in this or not, we're just going to keep getting the same question. It's a separate question from whether the towns want something. But that does lead into my third point, which is that I really appreciated the points that Greg Fredericksville made. I really liked what he said about, a third-party review I mean, maybe it's the DESI review. I mean, maybe a lot of this comes out of our, EES project, whatever the process is, and then perhaps Essex might want to use the money they did appropriate for a peer review of that, or a peer review of all of the different audits that we have already and that sort of thing. So I thought that was helpful. And I also thought that his comment about the guardrails on apportionment was something that we should really talk further about as a committee, because what I was hearing from the hearing again is, okay, but what is the solution, the bigger picture solution? And we're trying to get to all those things by addressing all of the suggestions and ideas and stuff, but what is the big picture solution? And that was the first thing that, I know it's not the first time that it has been brought up to consider the apportionment as a issue, but I think the way he framed it specifically, and the fact that it was done in here where everyone could hear it, I thought the guardrails idea has merit, and that's something that maybe we might want to consider. And if that is the case, we would certainly need. It's not going to fix for this year, but that is something that's like, oh, there could be a long-term actual solution there, and I think that's something we should move forward with, and probably start with by talking about it in collaboration group. And so that leads me to my biggest takeaway. I didn't count, but there were an awful lot of times that I heard people say, I support a reasonable budget. And the people who said, I support a reasonable budget, were coming from all different points of view on this. People supporting a reasonable budget that means carrying forward level services, or reasonable budget meaning incorporate those principal asks, or reasonable budget meaning meeting the 2.5%. All reasonable is not a base. It's not applicable across all uses. And so my reflection on that has been exactly what Pam's been trying to ask us. We need to decide what reasonable is so that we can give that instruction moving forward. And I've just been reflecting on what I think that is. So those were my takeaways, really. Erica?
Like you, I thought the Manchester Town Administrator, Greg Fredericksville's comments were insightful and useful in terms of our long-term thinking. In addition to what Teresa mentioned, he also mentioned that, our growth rate, given where inflation's been, we've all said this, but, it's not unreasonable. And there I am using that term. That was the term he used.
It took 45 seconds.
The things you said about an auditor, I think, or the things he said and that you repeated about the auditor had merit. I also think there remains merit in thinking about whether we could somehow merge these ideas and the idea that I think Pam first presented of a mediator, and somehow wrap these things up together again to help us with a long-term strategy. The guardrails and the fact that, we do know it, but that Manchester has seen the downside of apportionment as well. And that there's value in collaboration, however we structure it. So
I think those points bear repeating, as does the fact that one of the callers mentioned that Vermont just announced that costs will increase by 18%. I mean, it is worth hearing things like that as we sit here and consider, where we should land somewhere between 2.5 and 4. 18%, my gosh. And then finally, so those are just my thoughts about long-term strategy. When it comes to short-term strategy, when I think about the comments I've heard most consistently from community members, and I would say community members very decidedly, both in Essex and in Manchester, have been the fact that they don't feel like learning loss has been appropriately addressed in the way that they want to see it addressed. And so for me, figuring out a way to include what the principals have asked for in terms of a mechanism to address learning loss, really, to me, is central to the budget that we need to approve. And that doesn't mean I want to be at the 4 or whatever percent that the first round had us at, but it means I think we need to continue to look at that and figure out a way to make sure that we're giving our principals the tools that they need to give the kids what they lost or try to address some of the challenges. So that's my short-term comment.
Thank you. So Pam, would you like to share any reflections, thoughts, questions, and tell us what you need from us moving forward to our next steps?
I think just listening to this was helpful. I agree with just about everything that I heard here, in that there's the short term, the long term. I guess I would offer what came to my mind in terms of the reasonable piece and what Greg mentioned at the meeting, I guess, are all things that for me have been discussed for years.
Yeah.
And if you're asking my professional definition of reasonable in the context of Manchester-Essex has been that 3.5, because that was that bargain that was struck many years ago in recognition that our key drivers are going to escalate us over 2.5. But if we could stay in this window, everybody kind of knew what to plan, right? So it's absolutely true that 3.5 isn't necessarily enough to meet all of the level services go forward. But what it does is gives us that stable planning mechanism. So we know how to use the levers and the resources that we have. So when we know there's a retirement coming, so all of the things that people are suggesting are kind of the ways we've managed to stay at 3 to 3.5 over the past few years. It's just at some point you run out of invisible levers to pull, and that's where we are. So I am optimistic that we can work in that 3.5 range, depending on where some of the variables break, that we can bring in some of the principal asks. I think we need to take another look at some of the capital requests and see if there are other ways of doing it. But we are, to Anna's point, we are doing the same thing we do every year. We start by recognizing the state system of funding is broken. The 2.5 thing makes it difficult for every community. We all have these discussions. I think a facilitator, and a mediator was probably the wrong word to choose, but someone to help us have the conversation in an IBB way where we're all putting our shared interests on the table and working from the positive to figure out how we can get to a long-term solution. And the two that are mentioned frequently is what Greg said, kind of the small cyclical overrides. And the other is the idea of some type of I don't want to use a fund where if we can define reasonable, whether it's 3 or 2.8 or 4, that every entity plans for that. And when they find themselves at it, great. But when you find yourself below it, you're putting away for the rainy day when the apportionment may not be tipping in your direction, or when there's a crisis in one of the towns and people just legitimately cannot put dollars toward the school. And if we all plan with that in mind, we should have a resource to go to that's activated when there is a trip in the apportionment formula. And I think, the apportionment formula, that's for the two communities to decide whether they want to address that.
I'm going to push
But I'm
back on
feeling
that.
optimistic.
I love the optimism. I want to push back a teeny bit though. If the apportionment formula is something that's going to be I do think we need to lead out on that. We need to say this is something we want to engage in pursuing with our town partners, rather than waiting for the town partners to work it out and bring it to us, because well, or although frankly, that whole thing goes right back to the idea of getting someone, a facilitator or someone to help work through some of these
I think we're
conversations.
struggling having a conversation. That would be my observation, that everyone is coming with positive intent.
Yep.
We're trying to communicate real struggles and real problems. Just some of the way we ask the question, Diego spoke to it. We're studying how to operate and how to communicate better with one another. We're not communicating, I think, the true intent, which is we have a structural problem that we don't have a clear solution for. So who can help us sort through that in a way where it doesn't feel like we're attacking one another?
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Alice.
I remember
Jennifer.
last meeting that we mentioned we're going to wait to talk about audit till after the public hearing. Is today the day?
Not as an agenda item, but if it's in terms of reflection from that meeting, yes, we're not gonna consider it in depth right now.
As a reflection, I really agree with what everybody else said and what Greg said. I personally feel like whether a mediator, I totally agree with you. Right now it's a conversation. Whether it's a neutral, either way, it's a conversation or audit, whatever that might be. We need a third party objectivity to help us, to figure this out for the long term. And I like what Erica was saying, that the combination of the whatever solution might be, maybe it doesn't have to be a full blown audit. If we can have a mediator to come and to help us to have a conversation. I don't know.
Yeah.
But either way, when is that?
Well, to narrow down,
that
what
can
do you
happen.
want to study through? No.
I've got an answer for that. So what I would like to say, what I'm missing here, and I wanted, I don't know how to make this come out in a way that sounds charitable, but it's not intended with anything but curiosity. I'm having a hard time in this conversation, as this is the cycle that continues to happen, with, there was a point when reasonable was defined. And it was defined as 3 to 3.5. That 3.5 was where it starts to break the model, and that was the understanding. But the conversation we've been having for the last few years has led us, has made clear that that is no longer considered reasonable by Essex when the apportionment is skewed that way. So it might be considered reasonable when the apportionment isn't so extreme, but it's not when it's causing a greater thing. So what is the reasonable part? And so far, the answer we're getting is 2.5% assessment growth is the answer. That feels like a really hard line that I wanna understand better, if that's a communication issue, that it truly is a hard line in the sand, or is it the beginning of a negotiation, or that's what I'm missing here is another side, or the give and take of the conversation. And it's been ongoing. Again, and I don't think it's malicious. It's just the communication styles aren't aligning. I agree. So for me, a mediator, or not that word, a facilitator, someone to come in with fresh eyes and ears to hear things maybe in a different way than how I'm hearing it.
Well, and that is in fact what, I mean, there are these people that do work with towns. So I think when you say that we need to know what we're asking, I mean, yeah, on some level, but also this is what some professionals do, and they work with towns that are at the type of impasse that we're at. So I'd like to think that if we ever got to a place where we could all agree on the right one, that they would actually be able to help us tackle the questions without us having to, scrutinize the questions too carefully. That would be my hope. I have a question about the regional agreement, though. I guess two subparts. The first is, my understanding is that the towns can't bring a change to us. We would actually have to. It is our. Okay, so there's that, and beyond that, could there ever be a mechanism added, an amendment to the regional agreement, rather than altering the apportionment formula, which I fear is going to be a real challenge, even with the guardrails that are suggested, that that rather than that, that we look to when the apportionment formula is in your favor, as it is right now for Manchester, that there be an actual requirement within the agreement to set aside. So what you've all been talking about, but a contractual.
Right.
So that you are in fact bound, so that Essex 5 years ago would have been required to set aside.
Right.
And in that way, smooth out the process and the formula.
I think
But
at this point,
do you
anything we
mean-
did with that would have to end up document, I mean, anything at this point, yeah.
When you suggest that, do you mean into a town account or do you mean into a joint district account?
I mean, this idea popped into my head approximately 5 seconds ago, so I haven't identified the account. I know this is an idea. I know I haven't thought of this out of nowhere because I recognize that this, an aspect of this was even proposed at your most recent town
Well, so
meeting.
Essex has one.
Well, the
We
state
have
actually,
50,000. Essex has a stabilization fund for the for apportionment. We have $50,000 in it. And it would require 2/3 vote to take that money out. And so it's my understanding that town leadership has been hesitant to use that money.
so that, I don't want to speculate on their part of it, but yes, we do have that came into play, I think a year ago. I think a year ago at the fall town meeting is when you either fall or spring, it might be 2 years ago. And so it was seeded with 50,000. It hasn't been replenished in any way. But since that time, I think it was last fall, I remember the MASC policy update that the state updated the laws so that regional districts can create such a fund. So you actually have the option to do that, which it was right around the same time.
I mean, however,
it
like,
worked.
yeah, I mean, we'd have to think this through a
Yeah.
lot more, but there has to be some mechanism where we could make it a little bit easier to have that pool of funds actually help the town.
Right.
Who's feeling,
Being hit, yeah.
you know, being squeezed.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions you have for us or anything moving forward? Well, that is our reflections. We know so let me see, on the 9th, we will not have a budget update. That'll be a little bit tight, but, did you want to mention the budget workshop? Adding a budget workshop? Please.
So I don't know that we'll have anything substantive on the 9th, but I will update you on everything I do have and whatever thinking.
Right.
Because I think we're gonna try to rethink how to package the asks and if there are some other sources, funding we can use to get at a few of them. Like, there are a couple of things on there I would say are good candidates for end of the year surplus if we come in the black. Something like the walkie-talkies, which is small. So I think we're gonna try to restructure so we can have a conversation about that. But I do think we need a little time coming into the new year where we're pushing on USI to get us a final number sooner this year rather than later. So we're hoping we might have something from them by the end of January to inform the adopted budget, because that's going to create a lot of opportunity. In choice in terms of what we roll in or how much we can take down. And, you know I do truly understand both camps of thought in this. I just feel the conservative side of me feels more comfortable keeping it where it is for the time being, even though I know they're working hard on our behalf. That being said, I think in order for us to process on things before the January 23rd hearing, we were thinking of putting in a budget workshop, similar to what we did last year. It could either be during the day or earlier in the evening, where we kind of just sit through and I can share some thinking about where we are, budget updates, and then get prepared to bring the questions for the 23rd. So for something like that, we could potentially look at the week of the 9th, so maybe after the meeting, 10th or the 11th, or even the beginning part or mid part of the following week on the 17th. So if people are open for it, I'll just send out some times. But kind of an opportunity to say, okay, here's what we see now. Here's how we're repackaging things. Here's what I'm leaning toward for a adopted budget recommendation. What do you think? What should we take into consideration? On the 9th, you'll hear Julie's program of studies update. I think they've got 3 viable models to blend the schedules for next year, so that's coming along. So I think we'll have some significant updates that just won't all be together.
Okay.
Is that the workshop that we're probably gonna put everything on the table to see what everything looks like and where to,
The good stuff.
and is it public? Is workshop public?
Everything's public.
But I think like we did last year, I don't know, you let me know whether you want all of the owl and everything. Last year, we just kind of got around a conference table and looked at the documents. We asked a lot of questions. We processed on some things. If that works for this group, that's fine. If you wanted to set up a hybrid.
I think it was very effective to have that. I think it's to have that in-person working with the Post-it notes and all the, and I think that the technology would be a distraction, so it's available, but we.
So when is
I would
collaboration?
propose making that
We're
a
not sure.
virtual meeting if we can.
We can do that.
With
Would that be
workshop and
set up?
collaboration, a lot happening that week.
I would look to do collaboration on either the 5th or the 12th in the morning. Those Fridays, 8:30 slots.
That works better. I hope people will be open to it. And
We're gonna
start
start
it
this
again.
week and we'll get in there.
I'm traveling for business.
Can we do the scheduling part offline? And I will make a plug on Pam's behalf and Erica's behalf. That when Pam sends out a request for scheduling ability, that we as a committee really act on that quickly. Otherwise, I'm gonna start sending like beeping, exploding text to us all or something like that, so that they can actually.
You can always do, I mean, it's funny because I do like to hear right away because otherwise.
Yes.
Otherwise
Otherwise
you're
you're holding
I'm holding
multiple
things,
times.
well, and they disappear because I can't
Right.
keep holding them. But I also can at times not check my school committee email as timely, so I'm happy if you want to, you can always feel
I
free to
will always
blast me
ping
and
people.
say.
Yes, yeah, but I mean, within 2 days seems like a reasonable, I won't bug you before then, but if 2 days have gone by and we're not hearing, then I'm gonna start bugging so that you don't have to keep tracking.
It's fine. I don't mind. Please don't read tone when I send out the reminders, because sometimes I block it all off, get it out. I've checked my box and I don't come back to it right away because I do probably notice I do a lot of cleanup on Fridays.
Yes.
So you get a lot of emails, just little ticky-tack things, so.
Great. Okay, thank you all. Lovely reflections. So finally, moving on to the next item, which was the school committee goals, community engagement. So just as a reminder, I don't have it, but within our school committee goals, the two that we did approve, there is a piece there about community engagement. And as I mentioned in the December 5th meeting, I had, here it is. Pam and I had recently met with Tom Zuppa of Junko Foil PR regarding, I had some questions about how to respond to some things that were happening in real time. And then we were able to also get some insight onto how he would guide us moving forward with community engagement. So as I sent out to the committee, he kind of gave a three-pronged approach, short range, mid-range, long range. These are not difficult items, but it is nice to have someone who is, professional in this, works with lots of different districts, sees things, what's effective and what's not, and give us some insight. So you have the information that just for anyone listening and paying attention, that short range strategy was using the letters to the editor function. Jake had sent back a question or concern about letters to the editor kind of feeling contentious in some, or not contentious, but being used to make argument or something like that. So I guess just to clarify, the point is to have something in the newspaper, whether if letters to the editor is the vehicle that works for that, then great. For the cricket, if they want to give us a weekly spot or something like that, that's fine too. Whatever the purpose is, but the idea is that it wouldn't be deliberative because it would just be something, it would be informational. These are the things that we want to help people understand based on timely things that are coming up. That we want to help people understand. You've seen that this could be done by assignment. Whoever wants to write these things is welcome to. I don't mind organizing that, but that was the first approach to be really engaging people in the newspapers right now. And I would say the cricket has to be paired with the Gloucester Daily Times. I don't know, I can't speak for Manchester, but I know Essex does have a population that still uses that. Did you have a question about that?
Yeah, question about that. I think that's a great idea, but sometimes I feel depends on who is communicating out. The other side will perceive it negatively. So I wonder if we were to have a just would report.
What is the other side?
Yeah. The other side of sharing information.
So sometimes like it depends on who we're sharing. I feel like people can nitpick and then it might depends on who is sharing it, they would just nitpick it. So I wonder if the writing would be helpful to come from somebody that is completely neutral. And we'll.
So I'm gonna let, I hear you, I'm gonna let Pam speak and then I'm gonna share.
Did
Yes.
several years ago for a couple of years in a row. And I don't know if it's the right prescription now. But to Anna's point, we picked a few topics that were recurring kind of FAQs.
Yes.
So this one might be, why does declining enrollment not lead to declining costs?
Yeah.
At the time, I would draft something and I'd send it out to the group. You wouldn't deliberate, but you would send back feedback. Annie Cameron was a big editor, so we would get a lot from her. We'd go through iterations and then it would just get submitted with all of our names on it, just as a joint submission. I think we could use Tom to assist with some of it for clarity. I think sometimes we are a bit wordy, or I'm a bit wordy. But we could use a similar process, maybe engage Tom for some support there if we just identify topics. And then they are just really informationals and they're not positioned.
So I like the idea of putting all our
And I
names
don't
on
have
it.
to be the lead writer either.
So I like the idea of putting all our names on it because the idea is that it's not from one person.
Right.
That said, part of something I liked about this idea went with what I've heard and what Erica had brought up in a recent meeting is that people want to hear from us as a committee, as the elected people. So I'm hesitant to say, let's have Pam or Tom, someone draft a thing. It feels less organic. I think it should be from all of us, but I am hesitant to ask a third party to write a thing from all of us.
Sometimes, but I think that it depends on what the content is. If it really is informational, and I'm sorry that I didn't submit my list, but I have the stream of consciousness list in front of me. And the first item on it is level services.
Yeah.
What
What
are
does
level
that mean?
services?
Yes.
We hear that question all the time.
Yeah.
And so if we had a weekly spot in the paper, and I agree, I don't think it should be in the letter to the editor section. It should be a FAQ or something. But my number one topic would be, what is our definition of level services? And I think that probably Pam would be the most appropriate person to draft that, or.
Yeah, but I don't know if it makes sense to people.
So how about this? I don't want to get lost in the weeds on each part of this. So I guess what I'm
Right,
hearing.
I'm just
is
saying
we
that I don't, right, I think that there are some topics that are more appropriate to be written by certain people.
Yep.
But we can all agree on them and put our names on them regardless.
So we could handle it topic by topic.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
reasonable.
the outside check is more for clarity and simple topic, so we don't get caught up in ed speak. And like when I rattle off the definition of level services, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
I fully understand that it may not make being sense to other people, so I just being conscious of that that's not marketing is not my forte.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here also though for us to, in a united way, because one thing that struck me in our conversation is, and some of Jake's questions and comments is this idea of, what message are we trying to get across and that sort of thing. We don't really have a united voice right now. We haven't had a united voice as a body in the time that we've served together or just before, in the last year, we have not had a united voice. But this might be an opportunity to do that. And if there are some topics that, for instance, it makes sense to have Pam start with a thing and then we give input on, or Tom start with a thing, or, maybe Jake's voice works for this specific topic, or maybe my voice works for this specific topic. But we're all behind it. Like, as a team, I think that might help to bring us to a sense of a united voice and recognize what we can and can't consider united.
Well, and I think that there are a lot of pieces that are very informational. And that the community needs the information in order to make their own decision. And so if we can present information, and then at the bottom, maybe there's like school committee recommendation or school committee stance or whatever, something like that, that's separating, this is fact. And this is what we think we should do given these facts, that it makes it a little bit more digestible. Or maybe we don't even offer our 2 cents, but there's just so much information that I feel like gets misconstrued or.
So I
Almost
think,
like an FAQ.
yeah, it is very much like an
The
FAQ.
reserve usage, the END, the class size, all of this stuff, what are the primary school budget key drivers?
Right.
All of this stuff that unless you're listening to every meeting or going back through and watching the recordings and picking through 4 hours of
Correct.
talk.
I wonder if there, well, I don't wonder, I think that there's multiple purposeful outcomes though. One is meaningful sharing of information in a way that's accessible and digestible, and it has to be concise because the paper's not going to let us run a page and a half on this. But also it is community engagement. It's reaching community members so that they're getting to know us as responsive members as well, in each of our different voices, but as a body also. So I think that there's more than one good outcome there. I think that people need to, anyway, that's just my.
I think we should do this. I think it makes sense. But I do think Anna's point remains true that while there are things that we consider facts, such as declining enrollment has not led to lower costs, the second we try to explain that, it will engender debate. So I think earlier it sounded like you were indicating that you didn't see how facts could lead to debate, but I think it will. And I think that's engagement.
Yeah, no, I don't.
When Anna said that, well, whatever.
Anyway,
Yeah, moving on from that. So I just think we should have our eyes wide open to that. We don't put these out there and everybody says, oh, now I get it. Now I get it.
Yeah.
You know, signing on. 4%.
And I absolutely don't think that, so my question was more, or not question, but my thinking when Anna was commenting was more about the, depending on who says what, people will nitpick. And frankly, we just have to accept that that's part of being in a public office.
Yeah, agreed. I do think it makes more sense for it to be akin to like a principal's corner, a frequently asked question, something like that, rather than letters to the editor, because I do think those are opinion pieces, and I think we want to distinguish what we're trying to do.
Yep.
I had another comment about engagement, but it's not for this, sorry.
Okay.
I couldn't remember what I was trying to say.
Okay, so just briefly, it sounds like we generally think that this is a good vehicle, not as a letter to the editor, but using the newspapers as a tool for doing that, that it's important how we frame this and what we're saying, that it not be positional, and it's going to be on a topic by topic basis that we figure some of this out. We may just need to, this may be something that we just have to give it a try and then refine as we go, but we're all going to have eyes on all of these things.
So do you mean that, whatever the process is, every piece, somebody might be more, might start a draft, whoever, but we all kind of comment and then everybody sign the name at the end. So every piece is coming from all of us, or you're saying that some piece might be coming from individual?
No, I don't think any piece should be coming from us individually.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that all of them should be.
Just to be signed MARSD school committee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
MER, yeah, exactly.
Great, yeah.
Okay. All right, so I think it's reasonable to take planning on that offline. We're okay to, yeah.
Who's leading that? You,
For the moment, so
planning wise?
I'm glad to coordinate the organizing of all of this. I don't want to put more on people that don't need to, but that to me is not that difficult. If someone has a burning need to, then we can move forward. But for now, I'll start the process. We'll see where it goes. I know Jake's interested in community engagement stuff too. So the mid-range strategy, just want to be mindful of the time. We're doing all right. Actually, maybe I'm gonna skip to the long one because I think that's a shorter conversation than the middle. So that long-term strategy, the suggestion about the sustained social media campaign was that the district has put in a lot of effort to merge accounts and make a streamlined social media presence. We as a school committee don't need to take on a social media presence on our own. But, right. But what we can do as individual members, if it's something that we're interested in, is, not everyone here is even on social media, is help amplify the message that the district sends. So as I will give one example of this. And again, nobody is bound to doing any of these things. It's if you're interested and want to, and if the committee agrees that it's a good thing, we'll work out who wants to. But for instance, MERSD Facebook page, we're Facebook heavy towns, right? Especially in different demographics. MERSD has a Facebook page, but unless you're subscribed to that page, you're not getting that stuff in your feed. But our two town sites, our two main town pages get a lot of engagement. And so it might be nice once in a while to have a planned sharing of specific kinds of things to that. That's what he's suggesting in terms of amplifying the voice that's already there. It could just mean liking something. It could mean knowing that. But I guess the point is we don't need to take on a whole thing. It's really just for us to support what the district is already doing in terms of a social media campaign.
So we did recently get email in which I think that somebody had misconstrued an advocacy group's post as an official MERSD post.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what we can do in the future to differentiate between those.
Other than let people know when they email, let them know that that's not us and that's a
Right, but
different
that
thing.
was,
Not really.
so if one person emailed, but how many people could have seen that online and assumed that it was coming directly from the schools and not bother to email? I would say more people than would bother to email.
So shouldn't we reach out to the group that might have similar logo or whatever it is to make it clear? Because some organizations do that, like if some people are similar logos, then you have to make it clear.
So there isn't a,
Trademark
so for that circumstance, because I did look at it, because I had to reply to that email, there's not a similar logo. There's not, and I think even on their stuff, it says not officially the district. That's a policy thing though, that I think we're behind on, that we don't really have an updated use of logo.
I just wonder if we had, even in our Facebook list, if it was like the official MERSD, like what are we now, MERSD?
Yeah, so actually maybe that's a request we could make of that, to make sure our things say the official MERSD.
Well, our logo is the official seal.
Yes, but make sure, but it might
anybody
help,
could use
anybody
that
could
still, right?
technically poach it and use it. They're not supposed to, but that doesn't mean it doesn't. So could we ask that our social media accounts say the official MERSD account?
I could ask them to try to do something. Sure. I'm on it right now, but I know what you mean. I'm gonna sound like the grandmother.
Are you
I don't
browsing
do the
Facebook
Facebook.
right
I don't do
That's
the
all right.
Facebook.
So this is like kind of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, so
I know,
I guess
yeah,
what
but
I hear what you're saying. I don't know if we're gonna really have any recourse. No. The logos all over the place.
Right. But it would be good for us to be able
Well,
to
and then
say,
it would be
you know,
good
it's
for us to
official.
say, if it doesn't say the official, blah, 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 then it's not us.
Then it's
So every post you would want to read.
No,
No,
just
rename
on
the
the
account.
So Pam, just so you know, this isn't as hard
So
as
where
you
it
might
says,
think it is.
yeah, where
So what
instead of where it says
can you
MERSD,
explain,
it would say the official MERSD.
The long-term thing again, because like you mentioned about the two different town sites and then there is the district site. So what's the plan?
So we don't have to do anything. The point was just that in terms of community engagement, social media engagement is part of a longer term, broader strategy, and the way that the school committee can engage effectively with the community through that longer term social media campaign is simply by amplifying the message of the main district, not by creating our own.
Now, if we did that, Teresa, and it led to responses, which everything on our town pages was responses.
Yeah.
And what's the position? Are we supposed to respond, not respond? Are you supposed to respond?
Right, that, I'm not there. So again, did you know, for your info, like, if it's something that we're sharing by way of choosing to do this, we should turn comments off.
Okay. I'm gonna sound like Pam. I don't know how to do that, but
I know how to do it and I can show you if you wish. But again, I'm not suggesting we have to take this on as a thing. It's just to address that is an important
I'm
part of
doing
it.
that. I mean, I think that especially when it's things such as there's an upcoming budget hearing.
Yeah.
Or there's a meet your principal. I mean, I can't count the number of times I hear from people that that they didn't know this was happening or how to get involved. So to the extent that that's a message we're trying to get out there, like that's a useful, I'm happy to share that with the comments, shut off, as soon as you show me how to do something.
Well, that's a nice transition into the middle part. So the mid-range strategy of this personal engagement part. So this is some of the meat of what I know Jake has been asking about, we've done here and there. His suggestion was to engage with our communities, both in members individually and as small groups, in two ways in particular. One is by ensuring that we're extending meeting invitations. So for instance, the example he uses, every time there's a meeting that's going to be about the budget, we are inviting people who care about the budget, whether it's people who frequently make public comment, collaboration group members, specific groups, whatever it may be, that we're actually inviting, not just hoping they hear about it, but actually making sure that people receive those invitations. So that's one.
In what form?
That's for us to determine. That's right. This could be as simple as us saying, let's make a concerted effort to each invite one person to a meeting. It really could be that simple. We're just trying to increase engagement with our community.
So the people that have the time to come spend 4 hours here.
Yep.
It's the same.
Right.
In reality.
Yep.
So if we were, so what's the outcome I'm trying to get? To get more people to attend school committee meeting?
So outcomes, I don't know that we can even say we have a specific, the outcome is making sure that nobody is unengaged because they didn't know.
I also don't
Right, but
think
if
that.
we're only inviting the people who, like, Anne's gonna be getting an invitation every week.
I'll give you an
So would
example.
like to
No,
come join us for 4
I've got an
hours?
example for you. So the civic action class, the ninth grade civic action class, they have an assignment to attend some form of civic meeting before some deadline in January. Daughter's working on a specific project with a specific group. I said, oh, you and your group might want to consider coming to our January 9th meeting where the high school program of studies is going to be covered. That would be a nice tie into something you care about. So as we get feedback from the community members, connecting it to times when we're actually meeting and making that connection for them.
The ask is, I mean, I know we did this during COVID because I can own having the posting go up and then share, ask the towns to share the posting of what's going to be on the agenda. Problem is, I mean, there's also just a bandwidth reality. We're gonna we get the agenda, hopefully on good weeks, we're done by Thursday.
Yep.
On bad weeks, we're done by Friday night. So I don't know how much lead time people are gonna have, but we could just push it out. And you could put something.
Could it
out.
also be, is it going out in every principal corner?
Let me
also?
remember. There's not,
EES does.
I'm just wondering, even if it's not the agenda, if it's the dates upcoming, don't forget, school committee,
Dates are
the agenda can be found here.
Can I ask, because we send down the presentation material, or we post it out.
Yes.
What if we send down the presentation material, take out some voucher and other stuff, but send out the material to the community? And then so people can actually read in advance, and if there's something that interested to them, they could decide to come or not.
I mean, I'm changing things up. And I'm not saying this is the best practice, but with the way we're staffed, we were changing things right up to the last minute.
What about just the agenda?
the agenda is legit. Yeah, that has to be posted. 48
Right,
hours.
but I mean, in terms of like affirmatively sending it to more people, I mean, we could try and do that. That could be, but that could get pushed out in the district webpage too, and then we could share it with the town groups.
So I think on this one, part of the idea here, again, we're talking about community engagement with our committee. Part of this, and again, it's not, this was a meeting with a few key points. It's for us to determine really. But we've talked a lot about establishing trust, rebuilding relationships, that sort of thing, and people hearing from us directly. So for me, in terms of the meeting invitations, which is only one of the two things, so we've got to get to the second one too, is I'm looking at this as an informal opportunity to connect the things people care about with the things we're talking about in a way that helps them recognize, yeah, we hear what you're saying, and here's when you can come be a part of it. That's what I'm envisioning for me on this, but.
Maybe an example, so like when I get a question sometimes from a parent about X thing at Essex, and I would say, oh, you want to check out their school council page, but we're talking about this. So you're saying, use your memory banks of people that you've talked with in the community who have a particular interest and do a personal outreach.
Yeah.
When something of their interest comes up. So this is, so beyond mass mailings.
Yes.
The person.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to believe we're doing this.
Yeah.
But sorry, what I see is the difference, and what I hear repeatedly is from people like on the sports sidelines or in line at the grocery store or whatever, who are always saying, gosh, I'm so frustrated with this, that, and the other thing. But gosh, I'm really sorry I couldn't make the meeting last night. I just didn't have the time. But maybe if instead of it always being, I just didn't make the meeting last night, I didn't have the time, it's, hey, that one thing that you told me was really important to you, the meeting about that is on this day at this time. And so you might normally be really, really busy and you can't make the time to come every week. But if you really care about that one thing, this is the time to show up.
And it doesn't have to be pressured. It's.
Right, I won't say it like that, I'll say
No,
it
I
much
don't
more
mean-
friendly.
I mean,
I didn't.
I would love to see you there.
I think we should too. This isn't to say that we're not doing these things, but I think it's making an intentional choice to do it and actually making a concerted effort. I think that's what he's suggesting here.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that would be the listening sessions. So he had recommended this at some point last year as well, and we just were over our heads and did not have the capacity to accomplish this in a meaningful way. He suggested that we just set up informal sessions for listening to community members' inputs and concerns in person. Again, I hope I was clear in the email and in these things. If you don't have time to do these things, don't do these things. Like, nobody's trying to put 40 more hours on your plate. This is for who can, when we can, and that sort of thing. But as an example, before town meeting in spring at the senior center, they do a session going through all of the town meeting things. There's no reason we couldn't just do a listening session at the senior center. They would certainly be willing, and people could just come. We've done it for
that was actually
budget
really
questions.
Yeah.
That was super helpful. I've had small groups of personal, like, people want to have, a listening session, just, come sit with my group of people and hear our concerns, that sort of thing. There may be questions that they have that we can answer as long as we're, informational on it. That's reasonable. Jake had a concern about this. He shared a concern about, kind of what is the purpose of the listening sessions rather than taking the opportunity. Tell me if I'm misrepresenting. He shared his thoughts with me and Eric, and have multiple eyes on this. Rather than taking the opportunity to tell our story and help people understand it. My personal opinion is that, again, we're not there with a united voice yet, or a story to tell, and that there is value in just letting people listen who aren't going to come here and speak in front of a recorded camera and that sort of thing.
Well, sometimes people want you to hear their personal, this is how this affects me personally.
Yeah.
I mean, Jake's point was, I'm hesitant to continue with the listen but don't speak theme. That's what we do in our regular school committee meetings. And it's both, and has been both frustrating for many who do contribute, and I believe has been a deterrent from more active and broad involvement. I don't disagree with that. I think there's some tension, right? I understand what you're saying, that it would be hard if only two of us show up. How do you speak on behalf of the committee? But I also think that just sitting there can make us feel like potted plants at times when there should be a little bit more given.
Well, I don't think that there's anything that keeps us from saying our personal opinion on anything. It just has to be framed as my personal opinion.
I guess just the term listening session makes it sound like, and for instance, last budget hearing was a listening session. And
Yes.
We really didn't speak. I don't know when you're using the term listening session, are you using it in the same way or a different way?
This is his term, so
It's his term, but he doesn't like it.
not Jake's.
Oh, sorry.
It's Tom's term.
Tom's term. Okay.
This is Tom's term.
I thought you
No,
were.
I don't think there's anything that precludes us
I
from
mean,
having
we're not
meaningful
having the back and
conversation. I mean,
forth
that would be
anyways.
silly to just sit and listen. The purpose for the let's
Could just
take
set up
in,
a confessional booth if there's no back and forth.
yes. The
Okay,
purpose
I
for
was hearing
taking
it
in,
like the budget hearing.
no, that was intentional. And the next budget hearing, I think we should have more
Okay.
engagement, but that was to take in people's response to a specific thing. But surely we would have meaningful conversation in these listening sessions. But the point is, we wouldn't be coming with an agenda of what information we're trying to impart.
I think Jake, as I did, misunderstood that.
Okay, so maybe I didn't, or that's my understanding of what we're talking about here. Similar to how, and I think I mentioned it in there, there have been times before a town meeting or sometimes before a meeting here when I just put word out and say, I'm going to show up at 5 o'clock or 5:15, call it office hours. If anyone would like to come and, share a thought or a concern or anything like that, I'm hearing you're able to.
That was gonna be my suggestion as opposed to targeting different groups. I mean, if there are groups of people, I listed off all the groups I could think of. I don't
Yeah.
know if others did that, but not because I thought that necessarily they're where we need to go, but because I thought it might help us brainstorm. But I actually think a more effective way to do it would be to have a coffee hour or a pre-meeting or whatever the case may be, and just be available and try and really push that out.
Because I think even during this school committee meeting, a lot of the times the public comments is a one-way conversation. And then for us, a comment is also one-way conversation. So I think having that, whatever office hour, however we call it, the interaction, I do think it's gonna help.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's no reason we couldn't do both. Come to and see how it goes, right? I think there's value in meeting people where they are. Asking people to show up to a place is different than going to their familiar comfort zone and doing it. So we could try these things.
I think we should set up, if we want to do like a office hour type of thing, I would recommend to make it structured. Kind of like similar to the school committee, meeting, know exactly what day and what time. So if they have questions, they want some back and forth, they know exactly, once a month, right before school committee meeting is like, so like
I
people
agree.
can expect it.
Yep.
It's easier.
And just plan right for it. Yeah, I think that's great.
But I think it would be great to have, if we did it right before a school committee meeting once a month, if we could also do one that was during mid-morning or something to give people a chance. I know you're always hearing from people that, I can never do evenings, or I can never do daytime.
Even before, it's a little hard. I mean, people work and before 6 is a little difficult.
Over the years, I think we've learned that evening works best for Essex, and actually the 9 o'clock slot works pretty well for Memorial parents.
Yeah, even down to our
Historically, it may be
PTOs.
changed,
That's how they.
but even the concert this morning was packed.
Oh my God, you know what I was thinking? If we can have the Memorial kids sing at the town meeting, everybody would show up.
Yeah.
Soundwave sings at your town.
Maybe the school committee should sing at the,
That's funny.
Okay, so just to sum it up, I think we're in a good time frame. It sounds like we are supportive of giving these things a try. I will move forward with just the concrete organization. There's no decisions and nothing like that. There's nothing, but in terms of the organizing, and yes, go ahead.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah.
While we're thinking about giving it a try and the timeline and the plans and next steps and all that, just to emphasize again what I talked about earlier, that there is a big gap, our calendar between end of February and September. I really encourage us to really think about how we want to plan this out in the time. That is.
So I'm gonna push back on that a tiny bit. The end of February, we are we don't meet as frequently, but we're straight into, town meetings.
Yeah, other than town meetings, there's nothing else on the agenda. But we know.
That's not correct. We have end of year.
Supposed to be some a lot of
Yeah.
curriculum pieces, but
Not like calendar.
Maybe not yet.
we
Maybe
can
not yet.
revisit it. I think it's on the planning calendar.
Yeah.
But it probably just says STEM review, humanities.
Yeah.
I have March 5th, March 19th.
Our spring calendar, it gets pretty full pretty quick. And then once we end up in the end of the year season, it's like
I understand
madness.
what Dan is saying. We, unless we have a big push up, and I think we might this year, but maybe we don't. It feels like budget goes dormant until it's
Yeah.
September.
Yeah.
So
Who are you? I have not felt like the budget
feel
has
like
been
we're going
dormant
a
in
little
40
bit
years.
No, but right now we're thinking about community engagement.
Okay.
What I'm saying during that time. check it out.
Are we in school committee
I can see
comment
that.
now?
No, we're still on community engagement.
it's
but
never
again-
dormant. It's not as active. It's not as pressing necessarily, but it may be an opportunity to focus on this long-term structural
Yes,
problems.
yes.
Because
Yeah.
right now, if you ask me to think beyond January 9th,
Right.
there, in all honesty, for us, spring, it's very busy school side with other things, but I just think it's, how can we be mindful about maybe finding off times to focus on the long-term problems when we're not
The mediator.
all hot
all
on,
that.
Yeah.
on the issue we're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not seeing, maybe I'm mishearing the way you're phrasing it because I'm already building that stuff into my understanding of it. So I hear what you're saying now.
Like divorce it from 2.5 or 3.5 for the time,
Yeah.
for the amount, in the moment, and if we were just looking at this as a consultant group that came in and had to solve a long-term structural problem, how would we tackle?
Okay, so can we close the door on that conversation then? Good progress. School committee comment.
So what does that mean? I mean, this all sounds great. So I feel like a lot of things that we talk about all sound great, but then like it's hard to get into.
It means that I will move forward, sending out the actual planning out like how we're going to do this and start getting the information put into the things for who's going to do what and how and when. So I will take that on and I will be responsible for reporting out on that in my chairperson's report on that. Any school committee comment? No?
Can I just say that I feel like we're making progress? That even last week when we had a public hearing and hearing any Cameron to really talk about wanting to put everything on the table, that's a progress from previous years that it was really just, one thing and nothing else. But like now I do see that I can see there's a divide, but I do see that there's a progress. That people are more open-minded to try different things and to try to make it work.
Thank you.
Good thing.
Any other school committee comment? Okay. I will move to adjourn. Oh, Pam has a comment.
I should have mentioned it in my report, and this is 2 sec. We are making solid progress on filling the director of finance vacancy. I have nothing concrete for today, but I'm hoping we will have someone here on January 9th.
Wonderful.
To start?
To be formally recognized by the committee, but I hope to have it wrapped up before the break.
Thank you.
My goal was tonight, but we didn't quite make that. But it's moving in a very positive direction.
I second your motion.
I re-motion to adjourn. She seconds the motion. All in favor? All right, we're adjourned at 8:58 PM. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for those who joined us. Thank you for those who joined us in person and stayed.
Oh, you're the only one left?
No, Ms. Leonard's here also.
Yeah.
That was like